Okay, imagine seeing a warning label. Right. But it doesn't just say danger. It says something way more intense. Drop and run away.
Hmm.
I mean, what kind of material, what isotope could possibly need a warning that extreme? It sounds like something out of a movie. Well, the answer is pretty surprising. Californium 252. So today you're joining us for a deep dive into this incredibly powerful, seriously dangerous, but also really fascinating isotope. Our mission is pretty clear. We want to unpack why it needs warnings like that, how it's actually handled safely day to day, and tackle a really important question. The, incredibly small but still theoretically possible risk of it ending up somewhere it absolutely shouldn't, like, say, a metal scrapyard.
Exactly. And it's a fascinating look at where this sort of cutting-edge science meets the really rigorous safety systems needed to manage it. We'll really get into the specific nature of its radiation and what that whole drop-and-run thing truly means for the people who work with it.
Okay, let's get right into that. Drop and run. What makes Californium 252, CF252, let's call it, so uniquely hazardous? Is it just the sheer amount of radiation, or is it something specific about the kind of radiation?
It's very much the kind of radiation. The main reason is its massive neutron flux. Now, when I say neutron flux, you should picture an incredibly intense burst of neutrons. We're talking about 2.3 million neutrons per second.
Per microgram.
Per microgram.
Per microgram.
And this isn't just any radiation. Neutron radiation is particularly, well, insidious. It goes deep into body tissue, and it's extremely damaging biologically, right down at the cellular level. It's fundamentally different from, say, gamma rays, which, while still dangerous, can often be blocked more easily.
That's a terrifying thought. Something so damaging, but you can't see it, hear it, smell it. What does that mean for someone who might, accidentally encounter it? How would they even know what's happening?
And that is the real challenge. That invisibility, the silence, the lack of any immediate sensory warning. It means exposure symptoms, like radiation sickness. They might only show up much later, often too late for really effective treatment. This lack of immediate warning also makes shielding it incredibly difficult. You can't just, put on a standard lead apron and be fine. It needs very dense materials, specific things like borated polyethylene or large amounts of water, even special alloys, to effectively absorb or slow down those neutrons. And this leads us straight back to why drop and run isn't just drama. It's a critical safety protocol. If the shielding fails somehow, or if a sealed source gets breached.
Which is unlikely, but possible.
Highly unlikely with proper handling, but the procedure exists for that if. The handlers must drop it instantly and get away. Evacuate. The actual label wording you might see is quite direct. Caution. Radioactive material neutron emitter. If dropped, do not attempt to retrieve. Evacuate immediately and notify radiation safety personnel.
So drop and run is kind of the shorthand for that.
Exactly. It captures the urgency.
Okay, so while CF252 is clearly the big one, the most famous for this warning because of that intense neutron output, its high cost, and its specific uses, you're saying similar instructions might apply to other potent neutron emitters, things like, plutonium-238, curium-244?
Or americium-beryllium sources, yes. They also require significant caution due to neutron emission. But CF252 really is in a class of its own because of the sheer intensity and its prevalence in certain fields.
Right. This all raises a really important question, one I'm sure many people listening are thinking about. Is it actually possible that a CF252 source could somehow get lost, slip through the cracks, and end up in a metal scrapyard? It immediately brings to mind that terrible incident in Goiânia, Brazil, back in 1987.
Yes, the Goiânia incident. It's a very natural comparison to make, given the history of radioactive materials getting loose. And the technical answer is, yes, it's theoretically possible. But I really need to stress it's extremely unlikely today. Vanishingly so. Just to give some context on Goiânia, because it's important to understand the differences, that involved two guys, scrap scavengers, who broke into an abandoned radiotherapy clinic. They found a cesium-137 source. Crucially, it was in the form of a salt-like powder that glowed this eerie blue.
It actually glowed.
It did, which attracted them to it. They broke open the container, thought it was valuable, maybe even supernatural. They shared it. Bits of it got spread around the community. It was a disaster. 4 people died directly from acute radiation poisoning. Hundreds were contaminated, thousands exposed. But, and this is key, Goiânia resulted from appalling security at an abandoned site involving a material that was visibly striking and easily dispersed. It wasn't weapons material either.
Okay, that context is vital. And this is where it gets really interesting, I think. Let's compare CF252 directly with that cesium-137 from Goiânia. Understanding the differences really highlights the different risk profiles, doesn't it?
Absolutely. The differences are stark, and they tell you a lot about why a repeat of Goiânia with CF252 is so improbable. So first, usage. CS-137 in Goiânia was used for radiotherapy. CF252, as we've said, is a neutron source for science, oil exploration, starting reactors, very different applications.
Okay.
Second, appearance. The CS-137 was that glowing powder. CF252 is typically a solid, sealed metallic pellet that doesn't glow. It looks, frankly, unremarkable unless you know what it is.
Much less likely to attract attention in the same way.
Exactly. Then radioactivity. CS-137 is primarily a gamma emitter. Dangerous, yes, but gamma rays are generally easier to detect and shield than neutrons. CF252 is a heavy neutron emitter and an alpha emitter. That neutron component is the big issue, incredibly penetrating, highly damaging biologically.
Which relates to the shielding needed.
Right. CS-137 needed moderate shielding. CF252 needs very heavy specific shielding, thick lead, concrete, or those borated materials we mentioned, like borated polyethylene or even special water tanks. Then there's cost and scarcity. CS-137 was moderately priced, more widely available back then. CF-252 costs millions of dollars per gram. It's exceedingly rare, produced in only a couple of places worldwide.
That alone suggests tighter control.
Immensely tighter. And finally, tracking and regulation. In 1980s Brazil, the tracking for that CS-137 source was tragically poor. Today, CF-252 is among the most heavily regulated and tracked materials on the planet, governed by stringent international and national rules.
Okay, so given all those differences, sealed pellet, no glow, extreme cost, heavy regulation, it sounds almost impossible for it to get lost. But you said theoretically possible, so how could it, just in theory, slip through all those layers and end up somewhere like a scrapyard? What would that chain of events even look like?
Okay, let's map out a purely theoretical, worst-case, incredibly unlikely scenario. It might start with, say, a piece of industrial equipment that uses a tiny CF-252 source, maybe an old neutron probe for geological surveys, or a well logging tool used in the oil industry. Let's imagine this tool is decommissioned improperly. Maybe it's just discarded, or perhaps lost somewhere remote.
Okay.
Then its outer metal casing, which looks just like any other piece of industrial metal, gets collected along with other scrap. It ends up in a scrap metal shipment. The critical, and again highly unlikely, final step would be if that sealed CF-252 capsule inside the tool's casing gets unknowingly breached or broken open, maybe crushed, maybe hit with a cutting torch in the scrapyard.
And the workers wouldn't necessarily know immediately.
They wouldn't. If that chain of events happened, people nearby would be exposed to intense neutron radiation. Invisible, odorless, extremely hard to detect without the right specialized instruments right there. The result could be severe, acute radiation injuries for those closest, or at least a significantly increased long-term cancer risk for anyone exposed. It would be a localized, but potentially very serious radiological incident.
Right. That potential, however remote, obviously explains the need for extreme caution. So let's talk about the real world today. What are the actual stringent safety measures in place to stop that theoretical scenario? How do facilities ensure CF-252 never gets into the wrong hands or ends up in a scrap heap?
The safety protocols are incredibly comprehensive.
Yeah.
It's really a multi-layered defense system designed precisely to prevent accidental exposure or loss. Think of it like layers of an onion providing protection. The first, most obvious layer is physical containment and shielding. We touched on this. Because of that intense neutron radiation, CF-252 sources are always stored and handled within very dense materials. We're talking thick lead pots, containers made of borated polyethylene, sometimes even large tanks of borated water. Some labs use massive shielded enclosures called hot cells, or even transparent lucite shields, which are good for neutrons and let you see what you're doing.
So physically keeping it contained.
Absolutely. The next layer is engineering controls and remote handling. Given the hazard, you want to minimize direct human contact as much as physically possible. This means using remote manipulators, robotic arms, automated systems for moving sources, storing them, surveying them. Often, technicians work from behind thick shielded walls, looking through leaded glass windows.
Makes sense. Keep people away.
Keep people away, keep time near the source short. Which brings us to procedural controls and strict access. Everything operates under the A-layer principle.
A-layer.
Stands for as low as reasonably achievable. It's a fundamental principle of radiation safety. Minimize your exposure time, maximize your distance from the source, and use shielding whenever possible. Access to areas with CF-252 is tightly controlled. Only authorized personnel who've had extensive specialized training are allowed anywhere near it. The facilities themselves are designed with controlled corridors and interlocks.
And monitoring, I assume?
Constantly. That's the next layer. Continuous radiation monitoring. Everyone working near these sources wears personal dosimeters, devices that measure their accumulated dose. Areas are regularly surveyed using specialized neutron detection instruments. If any contamination is suspected, even minor, it's addressed immediately. There are strict legal limits on occupational radiation doses. And of course, there's specialized personal protective equipment, PPE, gloves, lab coats, eye protection, sometimes respirators if there's even a tiny risk of airborne particles, though these sources are typically sealed.
Okay, so that covers handling within a facility. But what about preventing it from leaving the facility improperly, getting into that scrap stream?
All right, that's a critical part. Beyond the handling protocols, there are specific measures to prevent CF252 sources from becoming orphan sources, which is the term for lost or abandoned radioactive materials. First and foremost is strict regulatory oversight. CF252 is governed by national bodies like the Nuclear Regulatory Commission in the U.S. and internationally by the IAEA. You need licenses to possess, use, transfer, or dispose of it. Compliance is mandatory and audited.
So lots of paperwork and tracking.
A huge amount, which leads to detailed accountability and tracking. Every single CF252 source is tracked meticulously from the moment it's manufactured to its final disposal.
Yeah.
There's a documented chain of custody. Facilities maintain detailed inventories. This is all designed specifically to prevent sources from just disappearing. Then there's specialized packaging and transport. If a source needs to be moved, it's shipped in certified containers, usually designated Type A, or, for more radioactive sources, Type B. These aren't just strong boxes. They are engineered and rigorously tested to withstand severe accident conditions, impacts, fires, immersion in water without leaking.
Built like tanks, basically.
Pretty much. And importantly, there are mandatory safe disposal programs. You don't just throw CF252 away when it's depleted or no longer needed. Often, the original supplier has a mandatory take-back or source return program. These sources are managed as high-level radioactive waste, requiring specialized long-term disposal, not just tossed in a bin.
And the final safety net, what if something did somehow slip past all that?
That's where scrap metal monitoring and border controls come in. As a crucial last line of defense, many large scrap recycling facilities worldwide now have highly sensitive radiation portal monitors. These scan incoming trucks and materials for any sign of radioactivity. They're designed to catch orphan sources. Similar systems are often in place at national borders as well.
So they're actively looking for this stuff.
They are. And there are emergency response protocols. If a suspected source is detected in scrap, there are dedicated procedures and expert teams ready to respond, safely secure the material, and investigate how it got there. So you put all these layers together, the strict regulations, the cradle-to-grave tracking, the secure transport, the robust handling procedures, the take-back programs, the final detectors at scrapyards, and the risk of a CF252 source actually entering the public scrap metal stream today becomes extremely low. It's a vanishingly small probability compared to the risks associated with older, more common isotopes from decades ago when controls were, frankly, much looser.
But not zero.
Not absolute zero. It's crucial to acknowledge that the risk, however small, persists. You could still potentially have issues in regions with very weak regulatory oversight, or perhaps in conflict zones where controls break down, or potentially involving illicit trafficking or black markets. The risk of orphan sources isn't completely eliminated globally, but for CF252 in well-regulated environments, it's minimized to an incredible degree.
Okay, so let's recap for everyone listening. Californium-252 definitely earns its drop-and-run reputation. That intense, invisible neutron radiation is serious business and demands extreme caution. But, and this is the crucial part, while it's theoretically possible it could end up lost in somewhere like a scrapyard, the reality is that the incredibly sophisticated, multi-layered safety and regulatory systems in place today make that scenario extraordinarily rare, almost vanishingly unlikely in well-managed situations. It really is a testament to how seriously that specific danger is taken by scientists and regulators worldwide.
It absolutely is. And perhaps that leaves us with a final thought for you, the listener, to consider. In our world, which is getting more interconnected all the time, with information, materials, technologies flowing globally, what role do these really robust international safety standards and regulations play? How vital are they in preventing these kinds of catastrophic, even if highly improbable, events? And maybe what responsibility do we all have as our technology gets more powerful to understand the unseen risks that come with it, even when those risks are statistically tiny?